Good morning. My name is Linda Chan, and I'm co-president of the Loma Linda University Medical Auxiliary. Welcome to our virtual APC Homecoming Auxiliary Program. We are so grateful to be able to host this program for you. However, we are missing the fellowship and ambiance of our annual luncheon. Our theme this year is faithfulness, and our members have certainly exemplified generous faithfulness. We are so grateful that donations to medical missions have exceeded our expectations. Tree of Angels have been in such demand that angels from past years have been utilized to fill the requests, and we will be able to give out 2 scholarships this year. We will start with some business. Due to COVID-19, we were unable to meet last fall, so there was no fall business meeting, and therefore no nominating committee and no nominating committee report. The request of the co-presidents and board of directors was to extend the current term of service from 1 year to 2 years. Several board members graciously accepted. Those few members who are unable to continue in their current positions will be appointed by the president per the bylaws. This is the 2021 to 2022 Medical Auxiliary Board. An updated slate of officers will be published in the spring issue of the Auxiliary News. We are pleased and excited to welcome and introduce our new president-elect. Merle Hildebrandt is our 2021-2022 president.
Boy, is the Auxiliary one blessed organization. I personally know what a hard worker Merle is. She has the highest standards and is tireless in pursuing excellence in everything she does. A particular favorite of mine is her cooking. Oh, yum.
Everything she undertakes is perfect. She's the hostess with the mostest.
Come on up, Merle.
Thank you very much.
We couldn't be handing the presidency into more capable hands.
Today I'm here to offer my most sincere gratitude to all of our current auxiliary board members who have agreed to continue their terms for a second year in these unprecedented times of social distancing and uncertainty. Particularly, I want to thank 2 very talented ladies, Linda Chan and Danielle Hoxie, who have so successfully led this organization as co-presidents this past year. In addition, I want to give special mention to Jolene Hilliard and Sharon Stewart for their tireless service to Loma Linda University's students through the Little White House. Patty Batten for leading our very successful fundraising campaign for overseas mission projects. Janice Shalene Stone for 2 $10,000 scholarships for School of Medicine recipients. Jeanette Allen for our Tree of Angels campaign. And to Chrissy Evangelista, our administrative assistant, for coordinating all of our activities. I am humbled to accept the position of president of the auxiliary for the year beginning this July. I am deeply inspired by the dedication and encouragement of all you, our leaders and members. Thank you.
What a program we have planned for you. So feel free to get yourself a cup of tea, sit back and relax. Danielle, our co-president, will now be introducing our special music and devotional.
Our devotional will be done by Sharlene Hayton. Sharlene was born and raised in Australia until she married a third culture kid and joined his dream to become missionaries to Africa. They landed in Malawi, a landlocked country in Southeast Africa, at a hospital where her husband was raised as a child. In a coming home of sorts, they made a life at Malamulo Mission, where her husband worked as a surgeon and where Sharlene homeschooled their 3 boys, cooked for crowds, raised a dog pack, and learned skills she never knew she needed, such as how to kill a poisonous snake, start a generator, find treasures at the Bendover Boutique, or drive in the rainy season on roads that were ankle-deep in mud. She now resides in Redlands, California, with her husband and 3 sons, and maintains contact with her many friends and family in Australia and Malawi.
In early July 2019, I was a 38-year-old wonder. I say wonder because that is how my 40-year-old self today remembers her, the 38-year-old me. I spent my mornings homeschooling our 3 boys at our mission home in Southeast Africa, and my afternoons were rushed away by writing a book, organizing the house and whatever food we might want to eat for supper, and inviting whoever we might want to eat it with over. I had regular yoga dates with my friend Erin, and weekly tennis lessons where my Malawian coach was never too shy to tell me if I had gained or lost weight, and as a result was either a very fast and impressive mama or a very slow and sluggish one. One year, my very fast year, he enrolled my friend and I into the doubles tournament at the Malawi Open, so I assumed I was never too fat or slow after that. Sunday mornings, I would ride the long loop road on my permanently muddy mountain bike with my friend Casey, and we would zip through villages at lightning speeds, mostly to avoid being stared at and chased by the early rising children. 3 days a week, I would run on red dirt roads that carved through the tea fields, which fanned out like great green carpets from the mission. And when our family had a weekend off, we would hike the local ranges of Mount Melange and on occasion race our porters to the rustic huts where we would stay a night with those who had hiked with us, those who we met on the trails, and several well-fed, sneaky rats who were notorious for eating through backpacks, dragging underwear and socks beneath doors to their nests, and scampering across children who slept too heavily to keep one eye open. But a lot changed for me when a diagnosis of advanced ovarian cancer in 2019 turned my healthy and reliable body, my yoga muscles, my mountain bike thighs, my running, tennis, and mountain hiking stamina into jelly. 2 large surgeries and 7 days in the hospital recovering saw my body go from hero to zero in what literally felt like 60 seconds. I went from living to dying, from dreaming to dreading. I wondered what the world would be like for my children and husband without me in it. Benson 11, Hudson 9, and Jet only 7. Would they remember me? Would they know I loved to dance with them? Would they know how I held them in their sleep and allowed them to stay in my bed until morning? Would they know how much I had loved them, how much I would love them, even from the grave? I went from planning a bright and beaming future to staring at death in its wild, encroaching grip, which said, "You're not going to make it. People like you die. You are a statistic." This is the backdrop for the familiar verse in the Bible that I wanted to share with you today. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 7, "For we walk by faith and not by sight." This verse has always fascinated me. It's well known. Songs have been sung about it. People often quote it, particularly in difficult situations. Hayton, an Australian postgrad seminary student and youth worker, wrote for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Religion and Ethics column, "Faith without sight should never be construed as faith without reasons. Christians ought not disregard evidential-based belief, for the apostles always called for a faith grounded not in sight, but in the evidence of eyewitness testimony." When I came home from 7 long days in the hospital, we were still setting up an apartment in Loma Linda for our new life in America. And God sent me an internet installer named Tyrese. He asked me about my situation, and when I told him of my cancer, he dropped what he was doing. He looked me in the eyes and he said, "My mother-in-law had that cancer, and it was advanced too." Uh-oh, I thought. She's probably dead now. But he continued. "They told her to go and get her affairs in order and say her goodbyes." He paused. "And that was 10 years ago. She's still here and doing great." Wow, thank you, God, for this testimony, I thought. For someone fighting incurable cancer, walking by faith and not by sight can be a daily challenge. Hearing testimony of those who have had good outcomes gives hope in a world flipped upside down. So if we walk by faith, not sight, does that mean faith is blind? Scripture tells us that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith with reason is not blind faith. And the Bible, the gift of Holy Spirit, eyewitness testimony, and God's interactive nature all feed our faith. I've been more aware of the physical reality of this world after my disappointing diagnosis. But I've also been more aware of the supernatural realm, the things which require faith, the unseen. I find myself trying to relay this wonder with others who believe in God, but not in miracles, who believe in God, but only the God who spoke once back then and doesn't speak today. I find myself saying, just pause for a moment. God himself is a supernatural concept. Just take a moment to think about that, about God. So how can we have confidence in what we hope for? As Hayton mentioned, it has to do with testimony. I believe the Bible is a living testimony to the character and nature of Christ and what his will is for our lives and how he interacts with us. For me and my health journey, it has meant leaning into his promises about healing. After my diagnosis, I identified with the bleeding, outcast woman in a whole new way. If I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. What do we do when our body fails us? When our physical tents, as the Passion Translation says, are folded up? What do we choose when we groan under the burden of our dwindling physique? Do we choose to lean into what God says about who we are and where we're going? Or do we choose to live by what we know statistics tell us about our physical state? Paul suggests walking by faith is the journey of the person who knows where they are ultimately going. And walking by sight is the journey of the one who has no supernatural compass. When my good friend Sharlene was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer almost 5 years ago, a pastor visited with her. And in the darkness of those first days post-diagnosis, as she was cradling her week-old baby, he told her, "Live like you're living. Don't live like you're dying." 3 years later, she came to visit me in the darkness of my first days post-diagnosis and told me the same thing. "Shah, when you wake up and you're still here, you must remember to live like you're living, not live like you're dying." Today she is, as her husband wrote, staring at death and choosing faith. What does it mean to walk by faith and not by sight? Have you ever wanted to know the outcome while you're in the middle of a storm? Will I live through this experience here on earth? Will I be alive to see my kids graduate from school, get married, have babies of their own? Almost daily, I am reminded that I don't have the whole picture of what God is doing in and through my life. For now we see but a faint reflection of riddles and mysteries as though reflected in a mirror, but one day we will see face to face. My understanding is incomplete now, but one day I will understand everything. 1 Corinthians 13, 12-13. When I feel worried about the future or my diagnosis, I find myself declaring all the true things I know about Jesus and what he has done for me and for you. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Isaiah 53:5. And because of his sacrifice, whoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. John 3:16. So, if we know where we are going and we know who is in control, Paul suggests in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, that's why we're always full of courage. Even when we're at home in the body, we're homesick to be with the Master, for we live by faith, not by what we see with our eyes. So everything that I do, every thought that comes to my mind, is grounded in knowing the goodness of the one who saves, the one who loves, the one who ultimately takes us home. Today, I'm happy to say I'm doing quite well. My doctors follow me with scans and blood work, and the drugs I am privileged to take are working. I occasionally suffer from survivor guilt that comes with our sudden departure from a country where others who are in my same situation die. I pray fervently for healing, and my prayer journal is marked with miracles, but it's also scarred with the losses of those who have passed away despite my prayers. I try to reconcile these two things with each other, but I know God is no genie, and that we only see a little piece of what will become the whole picture. Each day I live for a moment in His Word because it is testimony that boosts my faith. Sharing our testimony with others is an important act to draw people into Christ's presence, the God who is alive today. And it is my faith that guides my steps, not my seeing. For in the end, for us all, and there is an end for us all, God remains faithful. We can trust the one who knows us, the founder and perfecter of our faith.
Our incredible vocalist, Jordan Otis, a mezzo-soprano with a graduate degree in vocal performance from the University of Redlands, started violin at the age of 4 and piano at the age of 8. She was ensconced in a musical family, and after many home musicals, started voice lessons. And the rest, as they say, is history. She is originally from Tennessee, but performs and teaches in Southern California. She believes music is a gift from God and is so thankful to get to use music to serve Him every day. Linda Chan, our co-president, who has many talents, will be accompanying her on the piano.
Be not afraid, for I have redeemed you. Be not afraid, I have called you by name. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you.
Hello, I'm Karen Watt-Nielsen. It's an honor to introduce my friend and hero, Linda K. Olson. Ever since I was a young girl, I've been following Linda. Our fathers, Albert Olson and Bo-Ying Watt, were classmates in the College of Medical Evangelists, the forerunner of Loma Linda University. They graduated in 1949 and both became pathologists. They taught together at the medical school for many years. I remember looking up to Linda as our families gathered for pathology parties, Sabbath dinners, and even the occasional camping trip. Linda was a senior VIP at Loma Linda Academy when I was a lowly underclassman. Linda preceded me into medicine at a time when women in medicine were still rare. When Linda and I both chose radiology as our medical specialties, my dad remarked that he didn't see how his and Al Olson's oldest daughters could end up working in a world of black and white, when he and Al got to work in color and 3D. Linda was born in Berkeley, California, the oldest of 3 siblings. She grew up in Redlands and graduated from Loma Linda Academy in 1968. She received a BA in biology from Loma Linda University, La Sierra in 1972. She then went on to medical school at Loma Linda, where she met her future husband, David Hodgins. They both graduated in the class of 1976A. She completed her internship at White Memorial Medical Center, while Dave began his residency in radiation oncology at the Navy Hospital in San Diego. They were married in 1977. Linda was in the middle of her radiology residency at the White when the fateful accident occurred in Germany in August 1979. After rehab, Linda finished her residency at the White in June 1981. She then did a fellowship in CT at UC San Diego. She began her professional career there in 1982. Her positions have included Professor of Diagnostic Radiology, Vice Chair, and Chief of Clinical Radiology. She was Director of Breast Imaging for 20 years. She has been Professor Emeritus since July 2011. She is a Fellow of the American College of Radiology. She has received numerous awards and honors, including the Marie Curie Award from the American Association of Women Radiologists and the Women in Medicine Courage Award from Loma Linda University School of Medicine. She was an honored alumna of the Alumni Association School of Medicine LLU in 1994. She has given numerous guest lectures and radiology presentations, written many scholarly articles, and mentored dozens of students and residents. In 2015, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She has since become an advocate for Parkinson's disease awareness. An avid world traveler, she presented at the World Parkinson's Coalition in Kyoto, Japan in 2019. When they are not traveling or off on another adventure, Linda and Dave enjoy retirement in La Jolla, California. Their family includes daughter Tiffany, an analyst at the Center for Education Effectiveness, UC Davis, son Brian, a fellow in minimally invasive surgery at USC, and his wife Marissa, and granddaughter Sierra, a 9th grader at Emerson Junior High School in Davis. I'm sorry Linda can't give you each one of her famous one-armed hugs today, but please enjoy her presentation. Laugh a little, cry a little, and then heed her motto, to get out and go.
Thank you, Karen, for such a welcoming introduction. It's a huge honor for me to be speaking to the auxiliary luncheon today. This is truly a homecoming for me. My family first moved to Loma Linda in 1954, when the campus was still small. The hospital was on the hill, and believe it or not, church was held in Burden Hall. At that time, it was known as the College of Medical Evangelists, or CME. Nowadays, CME stands for Continuing Medical Education, and somehow that seems fitting for an institution that has trained so many wonderful medical professionals and sent them all over the world. I'm very thankful for my Adventist upbringing and my education, and I hope that my story brings pride to my heritage. My life as an amputee may at first seem to be an extreme example of adversity. But as we've aged, it's become obvious to me that no one goes through life unscathed. Strokes, cancer, mental illness, dementia, things that turn life upside down in the blink of an eye. These are challenges we didn't ask for, and challenges we share with our families, our friends, and caregivers. This morning, I'd like to take you on my journey, a journey that for a few hours seemed to be a tragedy, but turned out to be very different. Allow me to introduce myself in a fashion I heard every day while I was hospitalized 41 years ago. Linda Olson is a 29-year-old third-year radiology resident who was involved in a train versus motor vehicle accident in Berchtesgaden, Germany. This resulted in traumatic amputation of both legs above the knee and a high above elbow amputation on the right side, with fractures of the thoracic and lumbar vertebral bodies. 3.5 weeks after the accident, the patient was medevaced back to the Naval Regional Medical Center in San Diego. So what does one do when their world turns upside down? When your life as you know it seems to come to an end? Since I never lost consciousness, I could relive everything that happened when our van stopped on the railroad track. I could see a monstrously huge train coming toward us. I remember trying to get out of the van and rolling out onto the track. Then looking into my husband Dave's eyes as he grabs me and for an instant held me in his arms. The braking train screeches toward us, and just when it can't get any louder, there is an earth-shaking crash, and the locomotive smashed into the van, toppling it over onto me and pinning me under it as I lay on the track. Maybe I can stay alive if I hold my breath long enough. If I let it out, I'll never breathe again because of the van pressing down on me. I'm moving, sliding down the track, and then it stops. I have no feeling. In the stillness, I hear strange words. It doesn't matter what they are. If I can hear them, I'm still alive. The train backs up. I hear shouts as people grunt and strain to lift the van. I'm told later that I was pushed the distance of 2 football fields down the track before the crumpled mass of me and the van came to a halt. It was less than 30 seconds from start to finish. I look up and I can see the sun. Strangers peer down at me, and they're easy to see because my glasses are still on my face. I look up and try talking to them. Uh-oh, something's not right. They're speaking gibberish. And then I remember, I'm in Germany. They must be speaking German. And I'm alive because I can hear them. I woke up in the Salzburg Trauma Hospital knowing what had happened. I remember my foot and part of a leg and an arm not being connected to my body. Every time I look, it's true. Both legs are gone. My entire right arm is gone. Now that it's quiet, I have my first thoughts about the future. I'm married to a wonderful man. Medical school is behind us already. I have only 9 more months to finish my radiology residency. And then my thoughts jumble. He won't want to be married to someone that's so disabled. This is the worst thing in the world that could happen to him. I'll just tell him that he doesn't have to stick around. He's still young. He can find somebody else that he can do things with. I can't be a burden to him for the rest of his life. What I don't know is how Dave is doing. I've been told that he broke his ankle and was knocked out. He married a cute, slim doctor whom he hiked with, biked with, and traveled with. What if I can't do those things with him anymore? Why would he want to stick around? The next morning is the beginning of my new life. I hold my breath again as the double doors swing open and Dave hobbles in with crutches, his left leg in a walking cast. I need to be strong for him, so I smile as he reaches the side of my bed, all the while silently rehearsing the 2 sentences I've carefully memorized. I've been thinking about things. I'll understand if you don't want to stick around. And then I wait. He lets go of the crutches, and tears run down his cheeks as he squeezes my hand. I didn't marry your arms and your legs. If you can do it, I can do it. And so we started our journey together. Morose faces and teary eyes surrounded us those first few days. Since there was nothing I could physically do, I took it upon myself to make everyone feel good. It became my job to convince our families and friends that we'd be okay. My cheery, "Hi, how are you?" greeted everyone who came into our room. Most of our transatlantic phone calls came from friends that ended with them saying, "Wow, you sound normal." And my answer was, "Of course I do. I'm the same person, just a lot smaller." This was an upside-down world where I forced myself to stare at the places with the missing parts, to get over the idea that my legs and arm would reappear, to start thinking about what we could do if I was never able to walk again, or what I might be able to do if I could learn to walk. Every morning, I knew I had a choice to make. I could keep my eyes closed and moan and groan, or I could sit up, look out the window at the fortress on the hill, have someone open the sliding glass door and think about what we could do today. Something that would get us one day farther away from the accident and one day closer to the new normal. It was going to take a long time to work through this. There was no time for why or what if or blame. It would take all the energy I had to move on. We'd been married less than 2 years when the accident happened. I remember saying the old-fashioned vows to have, to hold, for better, for worse. We thought we knew what those words meant. But what if the minister had looked into the future and said to us, "Do you promise to stay together if a train hits you and Linda loses her legs and an arm and breaks her back until death do you part 50 or 60 years later?" It was really hard for me to understand why Dave would want to stay with me until he sat me down one day and said, "Olson, put yourself in my place. What would you do if I'd been on the tracks instead of you?" I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. And then he said, "You may need my strength and my muscles, but I need your spirit and positive energy." So Dave took charge by setting up a schedule which consisted of breakfast, reading, bathing, and visiting family and lots of time outdoors. We held court every afternoon with the warm September air smelling of cut grass and flowers. We tried to outdo each other with jokes and funny stories, becoming more ribald as the afternoon shadows grew longer. My goal was to make everyone laugh, and to see the future as positive, and to avoid the tears and negativity. After everyone left at night, we forced ourselves to talk until 9 o'clock in the evening. At first, it was mainly Dave. He picked things out of our life that we enjoyed, things like music, work, travel, reading, and eating out. We talked about how we could still do those things in a wheelchair. He concentrated on what we could do and what needed to be done. It was useless to talk about what we couldn't do, things like skiing, hiking, swimming, scuba diving, bicycling. Dave has always been a very black and white sort of person. His immediate response to a problem is to create a solution. Notice that I didn't say look for or think about. I said create. He also tried to make sure it was reasonable. He didn't try to make it look very readable, though, I don't think, because that's a good doctor's handwriting there, I'm pretty sure. Thinking and planning were two things we could do in our hospital room, so within the first week, we started making lists. A notebook miraculously appeared, and Dave started writing down goals for us to achieve, and what he thought was a reasonable time frame for achieving each one. He told me much later that it was the only way he could think of to regain some modicum of control over what seemed like a totally out-of-control situation. I tried to put the components of my life on paper and then fleshed them out with what I thought I needed to concentrate on. Unknowingly, I was already thinking about my team and how I'd relate to them. Our marriage was uppermost in my mind. Knowing that I'd have to lean on Dave, but wanting to maintain our very different personalities was a big issue for me. We knew we'd need our friends, and that we didn't want to push them away. And incidentally, these notes were written, I think, about the end of the first week or the beginning of the second week. So this is my beginning efforts to use my left hand because, like most of you, I was a right-handed person. So this was also a writing exercise. At the top of my rehab list were the basic activities of daily living and my hope to get back to driving a car again and to use prostheses, while off in the future were my plans to go back to work. One morning, I decided to reach out to my colleagues at work. My new left-handed efforts at writing gave me my first opportunity to attempt reconnecting with my career. The first 3 words run up and then downhill. Dear Rad Gang, I couldn't have found a prettier town to be incarcerated in. I choke up a little as I start. I try to make it sound positive, prettier town, and also make fun of it, being incarcerated. My childish handwriting continues. They have let me look at my x-rays before and after. They'll make an excellent teaching file. Everyone that's a radiologist knows what that means. But this is really weird. I can't spell. It's shocking to write a sentence and discover that several words have letters or whole syllables missing. I force myself to spell the words out loud and then squeeze the missing ones in haphazardly. I haven't given a thought how to spell these simple words since I was in 2nd grade. From the beginning of my hospitalization, I wear 2 hats. Clearly, I'm a severely injured patient, but the doctor in me keeps peeking out from under the sheets and bandages. My eyes close as I'm transferred onto the x-ray table for a thoracic spine series. Funny, I never knew what this felt like before. As I stare at the ceiling, I think of all the times I walked past an x-ray room and saw a patient lying on the table, skimpily covered by a thin hospital gown, waiting for a radiologist to come in and do a procedure. The table feels like a rock slab, really hard and really cold. I vow that when I return to my residency, I'll never, ever let a patient lie unattended on one of these tables again. In fact, maybe I'll make all my fellow residents undress and lie flat on their back for half an hour the next time I see them sitting around yakking in the reading room. I can tell that my radiology persona is coming back to life. At night, when it's dark and the hospital is quiet, I imagine myself back in the reading room at the White Memorial Medical Center with my fellow radiology residents. X-ray films are all hung and ready for me to read. With only one hand, will I be able to pick up the dictaphone and speak into it and scribble the findings on the jackets while pushing on a foot pedal to roll the alternator to the next set of films? Can I do it fast enough to keep up with my colleagues? Over and over, I imagine the whole sequence, and each time I find a way to speed it up. It seems more doable every time I practice it in my mind. I open my eyes and I smile to myself. How lucky I am to be a radiology resident, and not in some other specialty that would require me to stand all day or have 2 hands. Our last night in the Salzburg Hospital came in late September. 5 surgeons filed in and stood at the foot of our beds to bid us an emotional farewell. 3.5 weeks ago, these vastly experienced, gray-haired trauma surgeons had saved my life. The one who was fluent in English spoke for them. We have something we'd like to say. We've been watching you for the past 3 weeks. If you were Austrian, you might not have opened your eyes yet. You have shown us what we believe is the American spirit. Dave and I were silent, not wanting to break the spell. We knew it was time to leave the Unfall Krankenhaus and our castle on the hill. Time to go home and prove these men right. With Dave's love, I knew I could do it. 6 weeks short of my 30th birthday, I lie on a gurney in the Salzburg airport. Dave stands next to me holding my hand, the only one I have now. I'm like a baby, very tiny, beginning a journey where I will start all over, learn a new way to do everything, from sleeping on my side, to dressing, to sitting in a wheelchair, and getting people to see me, to notice me, to know me. Even though our minds are overflowing with questions and fears, it does no good to verbalize them. I must grab hold of myself and take charge. At the same time, I must let Dave hold me and take care of me until I can do it by myself again. We were medevaced back to the Balboa Naval Regional Medical Center, where Dave went back to his residency as a radiation oncologist in the Navy, and I became an inpatient for the next 2 months. Interns and residents stood around my bed every morning, looking at the large, red, puckered scars that extend over the ends of my residual legs, what they now call my stumps, and the wrinkled, flabby remainder of my right arm, which now ends at my shoulder. What do they see? Certainly not the attractive, used-to-be me, not the 5 feet 5.5 inch tall, well-proportioned, 103-pound woman. They see a 3-foot tall, egg-shaped thing that weighs 73 pounds. I close my eyes and think, I'll ask Dave to bring in a picture of us together so people can see the real me. Maybe one wearing a bikini or my tight jeans and a halter top. Maybe a picture of Dave hugging and kissing me, so they will know that I was attractive and sexy. I want them to see me as a normal person. But now the real work starts and reality sets in. We seek several opinions as to the feasibility and approach to rehabilitation. They are uniformly discouraging. Most of them tell us I won't be able to walk because it will take too much energy. In the dark hours of the evening, Dave and I grapple with the realization that I may never walk. I try to smile, but my wet cheeks and quivering voice betray me. He cuddles up to me as I sit rigidly on the hospital bed. Putting his arms around me, he tries to cheer me up by dreaming up a list of things we can do without legs. Olson, it's not the end of the world. We can still go out to eat. We can go to the movies. You can still be a radiologist. He hugs me tightly as he says, and we can have a family, even if you don't have legs, even if you can't walk. Dave marched into my room one morning while I pick up my breakfast tray. You ready, Freddie? He says in a playful tone of voice. For what? I mumble with my mouth full of cold, scrambled eggs. Today's acute for your little rear end is what he would always call it, to get down to work in PT. So I met Lieutenant Donna Pavlik, a hard-driving 29-year-old physical therapist who pushed me, pulled me, cajoled, and provoked me. My goal was to get her to laugh. Hers was to get me to concentrate. Our enthusiasm was contagious. Other patients and therapists watched and helped. A stranger looking in would have seen people laughing while sitting or lying on the floor, butt walking, doing one-hand pull-ups or lopsided one-hand push-ups, all of them vying to see who could have the best time. Donna set high standards and goals. I was always drenched in sweat, which made my curly hair even curlier. Soon my whole existence in the Naval Hospital revolved around PT. I'd go down 3 times a day and then return to my room exhausted, where I'd fall asleep until someone awakened me to go to PT again. But there was a method to her madness. The rehab physician in charge of my care had made it quite clear that unless I learned to walk, go up and down stairs, and get up off the floor if I fell, I'd never be able to function on my own. Even if I did master these things, he predicted that I wouldn't be able to do the basic activities of daily living, like doing my own grocery shopping, because it would be too physically demanding. And let me tell you, he was actually the most positive physician we consulted with. And then one night in November, in the middle of one of the World Series games, they delivered my first set of legs. They looked like something stolen from a plumber's supply store, with metal pipes, fiberglass sockets, and Velcro straps. Soon there were 20 residents, nurses, and staff holding their breath to see if I could be held up and propelled around the room with these things dangling from my lower body. I felt like one of those Transformer toys. Part of the time I'm a whole-bodied looking person, The rest of the time, I'm 2 parts waiting to be put back together in the morning. I go to bed dreaming that tomorrow morning my legs and arm will be right where they belong, and I'll go on and finish my radiology residency, go on vacation, get a job, have a family, love Dave forever. Just be normal. 8 weeks before, life as I knew it had seemed to be over. But was it? What do you do when you get new legs? Are you the same person? Sweat rolled down my face the next morning in PT as I stood in my new legs with Donna and Dave holding me up. Clutching the parallel bar with my left-handed, I lifted one leg and put it back down. It was hard. It was going to be one of the hardest things I'd ever done in my life. Remember, it takes a baby a year to walk. Give it time, Dave said. He was my cheerleader. Every day he was there to hold me, kiss me, tease me, and praise me. I stumbled back and forth between the parallel bars. Then I took baby steps across the room. Then up and down the halls we clunked. Soon I walked out onto the hospital grounds, tethered to Donna by a rope and a belt around my waist. People see me. Some say hi, but most look away. I'd like to say to them, "Hey, I'm just like you. In fact, this could be you." Donna set the goal for me to become strong enough to walk a mile. We thought if I could do that, I could do anything. The farther I walked, the more confident I became, until the day that I needed to go to the bathroom, and we realized that I couldn't do that with my legs on. We'd forgotten that it's the little mundane things that get you every time. Now, this was before the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, so accessibility was very hit and miss. All of a sudden, my biggest nightmare was that I'd gain the strength to walk a mile, but never be able to get very far from my house because I couldn't sit down on a toilet and get up by myself. So while Donna's goal was for me to walk a mile, my goal was to go to the bathroom by myself. After a few weeks, Dave starts getting pushy. He insists that I go to the noon conferences in the radiology department. For the first few times, I really didn't look at the films. All I could think of was, I'm sitting here like an egg with these residents, many of whom I had just finished taking my written boards with. Somehow I have to get above this and project myself so they start thinking of me as a fellow resident again. I start talking a little bit and laughing and acting like the person I used to be. And believe it or not, little things begin to happen. One night, the radiology resident on call brought a problem film up to me. A few nights later, one of the other residents took me downstairs in a wheelchair to the radiology department and asked me to read the evening's films with him. And wonder of wonders, one night an orthopedic resident sneaked up the back stairs to ask my opinion on a bone film. Now that must have been my imagination because no orthopod ever asks a radiologist about a bone film. But someone must have heard about this because the next morning the ortho attending staff had a view box set up in my room where it remained for the next month. 4 months after I tried on my fake legs, I walked a mile. I was thrilled. My calendar from 5 months after the accident shows very few notes that are discouraging. Instead, I see little notes such as, walked into the restaurant with Dave, went to Radiology Society meeting, no wheelchair at hospital all week, got out of the car by myself for the first time. We even go to the beach every weekend where Dave makes me put on a bathing suit and sit by the pier at Scripps where we used to go when I could swim. Dave, did you hear that? I asked 6 months later. 9 months later, sitting at the Lufthansa gate in New York City. Our flight is being announced in English and then German. Hearing the guttural words makes me tingle with excitement. We're on our way back to Germany and Salzburg and Venice, finishing the trip that was cut short by a train less than a year ago. We're still smiling 2 days later as I hold tightly onto Dave's arm and we walk together into the Unfallkrankenhaus in Salzburg, Austria. When we pass the front desk of the trauma hospital, someone recognizes us and shouts, "Die Amerikaner sind wieder da!" That's a very poor German phrase, but sending out the joyous news that we are back and that I am walking. I am not on a litter fighting for life. I'm standing up and walking again. I'm whole. A few days later, Dave and I are walking over a narrow canal in Venice on a rough cobblestone bridge when he turns around and snaps, "Come on, what's taking you so long?" Stunned, I stop and stare daggers back at him before we burst out laughing. We're just like any other married couple. Soon after returning home, Dave starts watching me closely. "Your skin looks good. Glowing even," he says with a sly grin. Then a few days later, "You look pregnant. What do you think?" How can he tell? I try to smile as the room closes in on me. This can't be, but maybe it is. I look up at Gabe again and see that his eyes are brimming with tears. He's hugging me so hard that I can't breathe. I think it's his way of telling me that he's really happy. When I take time to think about it, I am scared to death by the thought of having children. How will I feed them? Can I change their diapers with one hand? I can't push them in a stroller, put them in a car seat, or hold their hand and walk in the park. What if something dangerous happens to them and I'm unable to save them? And finally, how will they feel as they grow older and realize how severely disabled their mom is? Will they think we've been selfish and given no thought to how weird she is? Will my disability embarrass them and limit their ability to live fun, normal lives? Dave, in his pragmatic way, says, "No matter who we are, our kids will think we are dinosaurs. If we're lucky, they might come around to liking us in our 20s. It's just the way kids are." 2 months later, Dave and I are back in Los Angeles, turning into the parking lot of the White Memorial Hospital, ready for me to go back to work. I've had 12 months to get ready. My new fiberglass and aluminum legs behave most of the time, and I think I'm ready to be on my own. I've successfully mastered the activities everyone thought necessary to live on my own again. Go to the bathroom by myself, sit down and stand up from a chair, put my legs on by myself, bathe or shower, get up off the floor if I fall, and go up and down stairs. Oh, and walk long distances comfortably with a cane. It's been hard work, sweaty, grueling, and oftentimes discouraging, but it was done. We bring very little with us because furniture gets in the way of my wheelchair. Dave hauls the mattress and box spring into the bedroom and he leaves it on the floor without a frame. This functions as a safety backup, so in case I fall, I can butt walk across the floor and pull myself up onto the bed and stand up if I have my legs on or get into my wheelchair if I don't. I have just a few clothes, baggy pants and formless dresses that I can grow into as my pregnancy progresses, and only one pair of shoes that stay on my fake feet 24 hours a day. It's hard to believe, but it's real. I'm going to be independent, living on my own again, and loving it. 7 months later, Tiffany was born on March 12, 1981. I'm tickled to be able to show you an 8-minute video that was made by Mike Watt, the brother of doctors Karen, Linda, and Pam Watt, whom you all know who still live in Loma Linda. It was made about a year after the accident while he was in film school at USC. When he and his fellow student Bennett Leeds said it would take about 70 hours of filming time to get the footage they need for a 7 or 8 minute movie, I said, "Absolutely not. I don't have time to do something like that." Boy, am I glad Dave had more sense about that. It's a treasure, and we'll take a look at it now.
We were on vacation in Germany in August of 1979. I was with my husband and we were traveling in a VW van which stalled on a railroad track. We were hit by a train, at which time I suffered traumatic amputations of both of my legs and my right arm. If I was to every morning when I get up consciously make a decision of whether I want to put my legs on this morning, am I going to enjoy going through the process of putting them on, it would be miserable. That's one of the things you don't allow to have an option for. Eventually I'll look into getting a prosthesis for my arm, but for the first year and a half, the most important thing was to learn to walk and to become mobile again. The one phrase that a lot of people don't like me to say is, well, it cost you an arm and a leg. That makes people feel uneasy. So I've tried to drop that one from my vocabulary. If I had only my legs missing, I would be quite mobile even without my prostheses on. I could get in and out of a wheelchair without very much problem. I could go up and down stairs sitting on my rear end and pulling myself up and down the railings if there were railings on both sides. I can't do that with one arm. Any handicapped person has to project themselves as being as normal as the person they're talking to.
Both of us are very independent people. And I think it was the beauty of Linda's independence that was one of the motivating factors behind her working so hard to overcome the dependence that she had to have temporarily.
For several months, Dave had to do essentially everything for me, from carrying me from place to place. If we didn't have the wheelchair, we were living in a two-story house, he had to carry me up and down the stairs. He had to take me to the bathroom. That's what you call being physically dependent, and I probably had more difficulty in learning to be graciously dependent, and I'm sure I'm still not always graciously dependent on people. I was very lucky when it came to my job because I had already spent 3 out of 4 years in radiology residency, which is something that you can do sitting in a wheelchair if necessary, and something that you can do with one hand. It mainly requires eyes and a mind to do radiology. I've been living in Los Angeles for 4 years before the accident and seeing Dave on the weekends while he was living in San Diego. I've ridden the train because my job is in LA and Dave's job is in San Diego, and it's the most convenient form of transportation for me.
Very early after the accident, within the first couple of weeks, Linda entertained the idea of an operation that would have made having a baby impossible for convenience sake, and I persuaded her otherwise.
He, I think, spent a lot of time convincing me that, he still saw me as the same person, and as he told me at one point, he told me that he didn't marry my legs and my arm, and that as far as he was concerned, that didn't make me any less attractive sexually to him.
I think that a lot of people wonder, what goes through a person's mind when you're making love to somebody that is handicapped, or when you're a handicapped person, and whether those kind of things can lead to inhibitions that might cripple a relationship. But we both found it very easy to overcome the problems. Our relationship was fairly normal, starting at about 3 or 4 weeks after the accident. I mean, normal for us might be abnormal for other people.
Once we decided to go ahead and have the baby, we went through the same pros and cons that any other couple go through. that have already chosen a profession and have waited for a while to have children, and that is, how is it going to change our lifestyle? And I had to deal with the fact that I was a physically handicapped person, and was this child going to hold that against me at some point in their life? It only took about 4.5 hours for labor and delivery. The most amusing or unusual part of it was the fact that I was able to walk into the labor room and deliver with my legs on and my boots on. I'm probably the only person to ever deliver at the Naval Hospital with their boots on.
I think that if my daughter can grow up to be the kind of person that my wife is, I would be tickled. That would be enough.
Two months after Tiffany was born, I passed my boards in radiology and moved to San Diego, where I started work as a radiologist at the University of California, San Diego. Our son Brian was born 3 years later. Our lives look pretty much like everyone else now. We'd get up early every morning. Dave would help me put my legs on. I'd get in my car, which had been adapted for me to drive, take the kids to school, and go on to work at UCSD, where I walked with my cane and worked 9 to 10 hours before going home to fix dinner. My workday started with the 7:30 a.m. ICU conference reviewing chest x-rays of the critically ill patients with surgeons and pulmonologists. Afternoons were dedicated to breast imaging, where I read mammograms and breast ultrasounds. My obvious disability actually became an advantage as I dealt with women facing the possibility of breast cancer and its treatment. At home, I crammed the babies into the corner of my wheelchair while I cooked and did household chores. As they grew, they butt-walked into the yard with me, and we pulled weeds and tended to the garden. While Brian and Tiffany thought everyone's mom had a wheelchair, an elevator, and walked with a cane, their friends thought I was kind of weird. When I told them I'd lost my arm, they often wanted to help me find it. After all, that's what you do when you lose something. Because Dave and I were a team, we did everything people with children do. And as our children grew, we kept growing and innovating. It seemed we were always devising new ways to do things so I could participate. Having kids forced us to innovate, to get out and go. First, it was the nearby beach in San Diego at least twice a week, with beach toys and dinner in the sand. As a teenager and young adult, I'd loved the outdoors. I'd hiked Mount Whitney and Half Dome, both of them twice, and I'd been to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. But because I thought I'd feel really bad about the things I couldn't do, I'd been hesitant to get out and go back to the mountains. Brian was 5 and Tiffany was 8 when my college roommate Carla called one day and said, "Hey Linda, when are you going to get your butt back outdoors and go camping? You raising city slickers or real kids?" "What do you think?" I asked Dave as we got into bed that night. "Do you think the kids are big enough to help you do this?" "Are you kidding? I'd love to go. With 4 other able-bodied people, I'm pretty sure we can figure it out." So just like that, we had a new team, our camping team, a rambunctious Montana family with 2 kids. Yellowstone became the first chapter of our travel saga. For 5 days, we canoed the remote south end of Yellowstone Lake, which was accessible only by non-motorized boats. There weren't even any trails that you could hike into down there. We camped in the dirt where my kitchen without walls, I was the kitchen queen. I butt walked down to the shore to the lake and pumped water through the filters. It might have looked funny, but it was fun, and I felt like I was contributing. Every afternoon, the fish for your dinner derby took place out on the lake. One family trolling lures, the other casting flies for the cutthroat trout we grilled over the campfire every night. We watched spectacular lightning and rainstorms. Everyone had to work to make it happen, whether they were 5 years old, had no legs or an arm, or whatever. There were no excuses. Sometimes there were even bribes. By the end of the trip, there were 8 people who felt like they'd accomplished the impossible, and even more importantly, they wanted to keep going. We returned home to start dreaming and planning an even bigger adventure for the next year. Over the next 10 years, our trips became more ambitious. Canoe and kayak trips through the United States and Canada, up to 120 miles each over 8 to 10 days. On these trips, everything had to be portaged between the lakes and rivers. This included all the canoes, all our gear, and Linda. So Dave concocted the first of many pack frames. I was still hell-bent on looking normal, so I insisted on wearing my legs, as if this looks normal. What was I thinking? Our 10-day canoe trip to Quetico, the great big huge Canadian camp wilderness park north of Minnesota, was my wake-up call that fake legs had no place in the wilderness. It was sweltering, about 100 degrees, as Dave started out carrying the full-size version of Linda facing backward in the pack frame. Within a quarter of a mile, I was begging to be put down, and Dave was even more glad to oblige me. I yanked my legs off, left them lying alongside the trail, and butt walked my way back onto the pack frame, facing forward now, so that Dave looked like a two-headed hiker. When he reached the lake, he gently sat me down in the mud and weeds, wearing only underpants and a t-shirt, ferociously swatting at the mosquitoes. The next thing I heard was the astonishment of 2 men walking toward me. "Wow," they exclaimed, "here's the other half of the body we saw laying back along the trail." So legs became a thing of the past, and they stayed at home or in the car. One more step in the path of acceptance for Linda. I started to believe that even if I looked funny, I could still have fun. And here's the final version of Dave's pack frame carrying me. Instead of just me looking funny, he looks funny too, because hikers coming toward us think this man has 2 heads. Over the next 20 years, our friends dreamt up places to go, with part of the fun being how they'd get me around once we were there, pushing, pulling, and carrying. Places that I've been on snow sleds where I've been pushed or pulled. I've been on river rafting. The top left picture up there is an 8-day trip down the Colorado River. And it even reached the point where in the right upper hand picture there where I'm in the wheelbarrow, that was down in South America where we couldn't figure out any other way to get around, so the wheelbarrow became my conveyance. I'd be the first to admit that not everything worked. The mermaid swimming plan failed. These are the second set of legs that everybody carried around on that Canadian trip, which I never used because they just didn't work. Linda, as a miniaturized skier, was good for laughs, but otherwise a flop. My midget legs only slid a few inches at a time and made getting on the ski lift really tricky. Time passes. Our children play at growing up. And eventually, we all actually look like we've grown up. And then before we know it, one day we get the telephone call that tells us we're going to become grandparents. And we realize all again that life is a precious gift and that we are the luckiest people in the world. Everyone who knows us would say that our lives were normal. In fact, many would say it had been an extraordinarily well-lived life. And so after 30 years of interpreting over 500,000 imaging studies at the University of California in San Diego, I agreed with Dave it was time to retire. Time to enjoy our granddaughter, to travel and enjoy life. But being retired doesn't mean we're done learning or doing. In fact, even though I'd been kayaking for years, it wasn't until after I retired that I figured out how I could help paddle by snugging the paddle up inside my life jacket. And even though I didn't have that arm, when you got a paddle like that, it looks like you've got an arm, and it worked really well. Or remember the slide I showed you with the big X on it, the things I couldn't do after my accident, like playing the pipe organ, riding a racing bike, and scuba diving? Well, recently our kids decided that mom should go down again. So with the help of a big, burly teddy bear of a diving instructor, I went scuba diving in Hawaii with my family. That's me, the short-legged person, just about the same size as my oxygen tank. It's Christmas Day, 2014, and we're expecting 30 people for dinner. Our grown children are happily cooking, but I'm freaking out. Out of nowhere, I start yelling at them. Hurry up! We aren't going to make it on time. What's wrong with you guys? I'm hyperventilating and shaking. What is wrong? Linda, the cool as a cucumber person, has lost it, which has never happened. It didn't even happen after the train hit me. 5 weeks later, we hear the words, I think you have Parkinson's disease. Our smart medical friends all say, you can't have that. You don't have the typical signs. Wanting more certainty, I seek a second opinion. But they can't make the diagnosis either. It's then that the radiologist inside of me says, go ahead, get the nuclear medicine scan so you'll know if it's true or not. As I watch the images appear on the monitor, I see the abnormality, an absence of radionuclide uptake. Oh no. It's another amputation, but this time it's part of my brain that's missing. Dave and I start thinking about little things that have snuck into my life over the past few years. Difficulty writing, slurred speech, loss of smell, restlessness in my arm and leg, and that anxiety. This time around, though, we have our 2 grown children on our team. They are visibly shaken when we tell them my new diagnosis. Our children who've grown up only knowing a mom who's missing 2 legs and an arm. Children who understand that you are not defined by how you look or what you can't do. Who know you can enjoy life even if it takes extra work. They've also developed a great sense of humor as a way of dealing with disability. So it should have been no surprise that while sitting in a popular steak restaurant, our then 34-year-old daughter burst out laughing. What's so funny, I ask. Don't worry, Mom. When your condition deteriorates, you'll still be useful as a salt and pepper shaker. I nearly fell out of my wheelchair laughing. Laughter is such a great medicine. So it seems like we're back to square one. We've been hit and knocked down again. What are we going to do? Well, we regroup. We make our lists. We figure out what we can't do and we forget those things. We figure out what we can do and do those things. We create new teams of family and friends and people to help. Every day when we get up, we choose happiness over negativity. Every day we reflect on what makes life good and we try to share those things with the people around us. We accept, we adapt, and we innovate. And every day, we get out and go.
Thank you, Linda, for your inspirational talk. You are an amazing wife, doctor, mother, grandmother, and now author. Linda has written a book about her life, and it is hot off the press. Linda has generously made her book, personally autographed by her, available to our auxiliary supporters. For a donation of $30, we will send you Linda's book, and for each additional $30 you designate, we will send them to your friends and family. I have read the book, and I couldn't put it down. I encourage you to call our office or go to our website and order. The numbers are on the screen. However, don't delay, as supplies are limited.
Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, e'en though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. Or if on joyful wing, cleaving the sky, sun, moon, and stars forgot, upward I fly. Still all my song shall be. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee.
I'd like to tell you about our upcoming cooking classes. At our virtual Christmas boutique and auction, we had several of you bid on our cooking classes. We would like to open up an opportunity for all of you to purchase them. The proceeds will go towards our Little White House and student assistance. We have a cookie class, an appetizer class, and a dessert class that we are taping, and we will be sending out recipes and grocery lists so you can cook along with us. We will have the details for you to sign up on our website or by calling the auxiliary office. Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the willingness of Linda to share her story with us. Please help us to not leave this meeting without truly understanding how great is your faithfulness to Linda and to all of us. Now help us go forward and share your love and faithfulness with others. We are your children and so blessed because of it. Let us share the joy of that blessing with others. Continue to lead the auxiliary and let us represent you in the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.